Godly. All right. Hey, good evening. I'm here. I apologize. I was trying to do some technical things and I didn't, and so I just gave up. It is kind of hot, isn't it? Yeah, if you could pull it down a little bit. Just want to make sure y'all hear me. Like yelling at you, screaming. Yeah, right. She's going to bring it down just a smidge. That's a technical term. All right. Do you see which one it is? It should be under preach. Yeah. Now I'll just keep talking, and then you can pull it down a little bit and see. Did you find it? There it is. All right. A little bit down. How's that? Is that better? Steve's like, I can't really tell. Okay. I think that's okay. I don't hear myself as disorientingly loud. So some announcements before we get into our lesson tonight. Not a ton going on, but in terms of number of announcements, but all good things. We have a women's ministry event coming up November 1st, I believe. It's a Saturday. Is it going to be in the FLC? And one of our slides is correct and the other one's not. Starts at 12:30. What's the wrong slide say? Oh, okay. Yes, so it's different than what they've done in the past. It's a painting party. And there's a lady that's coming in to lead it, and so there's only a set number of spots that you can do. There's 30 total, and it's ages high school girls and up, I think. And so go online, you can register there. If you have any questions, you can ask Melissa. Oh, nice. Okay. So normally it's a $30 class. The women's ministry is covering $20 of it, so it's just $10 a person. And you come and have a painting class together and good fellowship. Okay. Yeah. Sign up online or through the app, because they take you to the same place. So the website or the app. Yeah, thank you. Good question. Also, just a reminder, Upward is coming, so keep praying for that. There's a lot that goes into that, as I've been saying. And we're running this year with just entire volunteers and volunteer leadership, and they have a lot on their hands, and I think they're doing a great job already, but there's still so much more to come. And so keep praying for that and everyone involved in that. And then lastly, tonight is the night for our monthly business meeting. And so after the lesson and after the prayer, we will call ourselves into a business meeting as we do and sort through those things together. One last thing. I don't know if you've noticed this. I put these out. I use them, not when I'm preaching, but there's this little slip of paper. It's blank, and it says sermon notes. I spent a lot of time designing this, as you can tell. And I just put a ton of them back there on that big table in the foyer. Because I know some people like taking notes, some people do it on their phone. I'm still just a very tangible person. I need to feel it and write it down. So if that's you and you come and I say something worth noting, or if God is speaking, more important, if God is speaking to you, don't assume you'll remember it tomorrow or next week. Go ahead and write it down. So anyway, we're trying to make this easier for people to take notes. That's part of why when I preach on Sundays, I put certain points up on the screen. It's not just so like it sounds or looks good, but so that you can remember and hopefully write it down. So that's what that's for. There you go. I don't think I have any other announcements, do you? I don't think so either. Okay. Well, let's get into our lesson. Do some recap where we've been in 1 Timothy, and this is class time, open note quiz. Who wrote this letter? Paul did. Who was he writing it to? 1 Timothy. Timothy the first time. And who was Timothy to Paul? Sorry, I did something that popped. Yes, like a son, like a spiritual son to him, and not just because they were close, spiritually speaking, but also in the sense that they were both Christians, they were, and Paul was a mentor for him, but also in terms of ministry. He was like a son. He was a protege of Paul. And at what point of Paul's life and ministry was he writing this letter? Okay, towards what I was looking for. Yeah, what I was looking for, towards the end of his life. So he knows that his race is almost over, and so he is passing the baton, we said. He's passing the torch to the next generation of leaders, of pastors. And so Timothy is one, Titus is another. Titus gets his own letter. Do you remember where Timothy was stationed when Paul wrote this letter to him? Paul had left him where, or sent him where? Ephesus. And this is background context for this letter. Paul had been in Ephesus before. We see that in the book of Acts, and he had a really good good time there, good relationship with those people, stayed for a long time. When he left, there was a lot of weeping. When he went on his way to Rome, they didn't want him to go. Paul wrote a letter to the Ephesians, but time had gone by, things had changed, and so what were the two big reasons that Paul wrote this letter to Timothy? Do you remember? There's two big categories that we said that Paul was wanting to address in this letter. Heresy, so false teaching and false teachers, wanted to address that issue and some of the teaching itself, but also just the problem of the false teachers and the problems they were causing. And then what was the other big thing that he was hoping to touch on with this letter? Yeah, disorganized. What were you going to say, Kyle? Church structure and leadership, absolutely. There was, because of the false teaching, it had led to a lot of disunity and dysfunction within the church, and leadership was all messed up. Their times of worship together were chaotic and disorganized and distracting. It was just, the church was a mess. It was in a mess. And so Paul sends Timothy to help reestablish the truth, but also reestablish church structure and church leadership to guide the church moving forward. And we said Paul was writing this to Timothy because Timothy needed to hear it as instructions for him as he was leading. But we said even though this is a personal letter to Timothy, it's not a private letter. These aren't secret things just for Timothy. It was to bless and to instruct the entire church back then and even today. So that's why we're studying it, because there's a lot of truth here, a lot of principles that we can pull from that situation, because as Scripture, this is God-breathed, right? This is Spirit-inspired, and it speaks not just to that historical situation, but throughout time for all of God's people. So that's why we've been going through it. So chapter 1, I'll give you just a super overview. Paul addresses a lot of the false teaching and false teachers and the problems that they had. And we touched a little bit on some of the false teaching itself, but the bigger issue Paul was touching on in chapter 1 was their character. They weren't good people. And it was showing up in how they lived their lives, and that was causing problems. And so Paul wanted Timothy to be different. And good teachers, good leaders are going to be different from their character into their behavior, and then, of course, including their teaching. That's chapter 1. Chapter 2, Paul shifts his focus to the second big focus of church structure and church order, and trying to provide some more structure. And so he talks about things like prayer, how important and vital, not optional, prayer is. He talks about men in worship, women in worship, and we said there are some principles at play there that some people have kind of taken to some extremes in unhelpful ways, but the baseline principles that we pull out, men, Paul says, when you come to worship together, instead of wasting your time and everyone else's time arguing and bickering over things, you should focus first and foremost on what? On prayer. On being people of prayer and leading people in prayer and praying for who, did Paul say? Do you remember? Everyone, especially those in leadership, right? Okay. So, man, you spend your time and energy, first and foremost, I want you to be known for, I want you to set an example for others by being men of prayer who lift up holy hands to God in prayer, right? That's the example I want you to set, not this bickering and this arguing and all this bravado and back and forth that men do, right? Put all that aside. You leave that outside. When you come in here, I want you to lead by men of character and prayer. And then women, he had two words for them in general. One was, women, when you come, I want you to present yourselves in a way that puts the focus on your holiness and not on your wealth or your beauty. So first, he says, the way you dress. And he gives some examples that were really relevant back then, but then speak to us today. Don't dress in such a way that brings the attention to you and what you look like or how much money you have, your status. You don't need to be the focus. What we dress, how we dress, all of us, men and women and children, what we wear communicates something. And so Paul is saying, baseline, don't be a distraction. Don't make the attention be on you. Instead, women, he says, dress yourselves with good works, with holiness. So when we look at you, what do we notice? That you're a godly woman. Secondly, relatedly, and we said this is where it gets really controversial, Paul addressed women and how they were to participate in worship. And so we believe that because of the false teaching in their community, this is going to come up in later chapters, especially Paul's going to come back to this and women's role in it, but he instructed them to be quiet in worship. And so we compared that with some other passages where Paul talks about women not being quiet in worship, that they were active verbal participants in worship. And so instead of trying to like draw really, really hard lines, we were trying to pull out the key principles at play there. And we recognized that women in his day and age were being loud and disruptive and distracting in worship. And we don't know the exact details of what they were saying or how they were saying it, but it was bad enough that he told them to be quiet. You're causing problems. And so Paul is not anti-woman. Paul is not anti-women learning or being involved in the life of the church, but he is anti-women being disruptive or distracting. Same for men, but here in this situation, that's what he focused on for them. So bottom line, men and women, when you gather together for worship, where should the attention be? The Lord, absolutely. And he gives specific examples of what they were doing wrong, but it could be any number of things that we do that is distracting from why we're really here in the first place. So he says, cut it out. Grow up and cut it out. That's my modern translation, all right? And then chapter 3, we've moved into chapter 3, and Paul now addresses leadership. I want to address leadership. And the last time I was here when I taught, we looked at the first section of chapter 3, and it was qualifications for pastors, for elders. And we said there was a lot of things, and we went line by line and phrase by phrase, but a couple of the big things that we pointed out is that Paul focuses more here on character than he does on duties. So there are certain duties that a pastor should be doing and needs to be competent and skilled at. He mentions one, which is teaching. They need to be able to teach. But other than that, he says the real focus is, are they a person of godly character? Is he a godly man? That's what we need. And we talked last time about this, that how important that is, but also how easily we mix this up and how often we can be distracted by someone who's a smooth communicator or they're gifted or skilled in some way. We can be distracted by skill sets and miss the character. But what happens if a man of poor character gets put in a position of leadership? Well, let's just talk generally in life. If let's not name names, but think of an example. Maybe you had a boss or a manager that was not of good character, was put in a position of influence and authority. If they are not a person of character, what impact does that make? Not good, right? And if you've ever been with someone like that or worked under someone like that, it's miserable for everyone, right? And the greater the stage or the greater the position, the higher the need to have someone of character and not just skills, right? So whether it's a political leadership or, again, business leadership or at a school, but especially in a church, if you put someone in a position of prominence, of influence, of authority, of power, they need to have character that can back it up and lead well. Otherwise, what happens? All sorts of problems. And they were living it. They were living in I don't know what is happening to me tonight. I'm exploding. I think I found it, whatever that was. All right. You say it's the Holy Spirit? In a good way, hopefully? I haven't said anything bad yet? Okay. In a good way. Anyway, character matters, especially in leadership. Character matters for all of God's people, but especially those who are in positions of leadership, because if you get that wrong, they can cause all sorts of damage to themselves, to others, and the witness of the church. So Paul says character matters. All right. Enough of that. Now we're going to move into Paul's qualifications for deacons. And actually, before we get into what Paul says here about deacons, let's back up and go to Acts chapter 6. I want to focus there first. Acts chapter 6 is, as far as I know, and as far as we know, where deacons really first come from. So we're going to look at Acts 6, 1 through 7, talk about that a little bit, and that will be our kind of springboard into Paul's qualifications in 1 Timothy 3. So if someone is there, if you can read out loud for us, Acts 6, 1 through 7. Okay. First, let me say you did fantastic reading through those names. That's why I had you read it, not me. You just plowed through it. That was awesome. All right. What stood out to you from this passage? What kind of key ideas, key things happened here? I'm going to write some of your thoughts on the board, and then I'll tell you what I think. What stands out to you about this passage? Okay. So the word deacon didn't show up here, but it's describing what eventually became the position of deacon. And just so you know, the word deacon is from a Greek word that just very simply means servant. The disciples here, the original disciples, Peter and the gang, they allude to that by saying we shouldn't be serving tables. We shouldn't be waiters. I'm going to come back to that. But anyway, Scott, say what you said again because it was good. So these folks were chosen to focus on kind of everyday chores. Okay. What else did y'all see or pick out? Oh, they're to be of good character. Okay, that's key. Oh, okay. Needed to be full of wisdom. What else? Anything else stand out to you about this passage? What was the result? That's why I had us read verse 7. People were blessed. Whose idea was it? Who's like, you know what? We should do this different. Who said it? And why did they say it? What does it say? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good. Okay. So the apostles, so the leadership that was already in place, who were already filled with the Holy Spirit, recognized, man, things aren't working. We need to do something different. We need help. We need help. Let me ask you this question. How important, this is like a subnote of a subnote of a subnote, but I want to touch on it. The apostles, I put it the apostles, a capital A, like this is like the formal group of the guys, right? In Christianity, they're not even called Christians yet. The Christian movement is new and it's exploding in growth as you read through the story of Acts, right? And the apostles, like the formally recognized, these were the guys that were with Jesus. My gosh, I don't know what is happening today. Regardless, they were in positions of power and prominence and importance, and yet, what I'm touching on, they were humble enough to recognize we need help. We can't do everything that needs to be done. We see that needs are being missed, not being met. People are falling through the cracks, and that's not okay. We need help. And so they decide, prayerfully, wisely, to find some people that can do some of the things that can free them up to do what they do. So the apostles here, is it Peter that says it? Let me look. So this is verse 2. The 12 summoned the full number of all the disciples and said, it's not right that we should give up preaching the word of God to serve tables. This is not a statement of arrogance. It's not like, hey, this is beneath us. Let's find some of you losers who can do the unsavory work so we can have the limelight. That's not what they're saying. They're saying, we have been especially gifted and chosen and called to preach and teach the gospel. That is our primary calling. We are responsible to God, first and foremost, for that. So it's not that we don't care about these things, but we can't do both as the church is growing. We need help so that we can do both because we need to as God's people. And so they recognize they need help, and so they called together a group. Let's find a group of guys. And what is it again that they looked for? Good character, full of wisdom, full of the Spirit. So it's not just people who are important or impressive. It's not people who are skilled or wealthy or anything. It's not even people who are just like, hey, do you want to do it? Do you have the time? All right, come on. It wasn't about that. They were intentional. This needs to be people who are of good character and full of wisdom and full of the Spirit. And these people then were going to come alongside, is the language it uses, come alongside the apostles so they could focus on preaching and teaching. We can call that spiritual matters. It's not really that distinct, but it's kind of spiritual things, so that these guys then could handle logistical matters. As Scott said, kind of everyday chores to make sure that people and their needs were met. So let me ask you this question. This is another subnote of a subnote, but I think it's important. What do you think is more important, the preaching of the gospel or the taking care of people? They go together, right? Right? It's so important for God's people. It's so important for pastors, for people who are in the limelight doing the preaching and the teaching, to not forget the needs of the people and not be so disconnected and removed from it that falls through the cracks. But they preach great. That's awesome. Praise God for good preaching. But if there are people who are not being taken care of, that's a problem. And vice versa. It's not just the needs, physical needs are the only thing that matters. The gospel matters too in the preaching and the teaching of it, right? But what we're seeing God's people under the inspiration and the leadership of the Spirit of God is, let's bring these two together and let's work together to do it. So apostles, later, as Paul's writing to Timothy, pastors, elders, you have a primary call to preach and teach the gospel and to lead in these ways, but do not do so to the neglect of the needs of the people. But don't worry, it's not on you to do everything yourself. God has given you the body of believers to take care of each other. And in particular, there's a group of them who are godly, who are wise, who are full of the Spirit that can help you notice, organize, take care of, run all the logistical things so that everyone is blessed. So do pastors need deacons? That's where I'm going with this. Absolutely. Do deacons need pastors? Yeah. And when pastors and deacons get along, and there's truly hey, we're on the same page, we're on the same team, we're both listening to the Lord. We may not agree on everything all the time, but are we moving in the same direction? Do we have the same heartbeat? Are we listening and following the same God? What happens to the church? They're blessed, and it flourishes, and who else notices? The world outside. I want to be a part of a church like that, right? Okay. That took longer than I meant to, but I think there's really good stuff there. So that's the background of the deacons, where they came from, why they came into being, who really did the leading of this decision, the Spirit of God. And then now, in Timothy's poor church, who is just full of dysfunction and false teaching and bad teachers and bad leaders, Paul's trying to kind of bring things back together with a good foundation and a firm framework. And he says, so these deacons, this is what I want you to look for in the calling out, the raising up, and the employment, if you want to think about it like that, of deacons in your church body, Timothy, and for us today. So let's read it. Someone read for us 1 Timothy 3, 8 through 13. Okay. Ooh, so good. So, like we did with the qualifications for elders, Paul here gives qualifications for deacons. So let's go through them one at a time. The first term I have, and some of our English translations slightly change the English wording they use, but it gives us a fuller picture. So if I say a word one way from my translation and yours is different, just raise your hand. I want to hear. I try to look at all of them. But there are a lot of translations out there. So the first one, mine says dignified. Does anyone have anything other than dignified? What is it? Reverent? Okay. So what does it mean to be dignified or to be reverent? Honorable? Esteemed? Yeah, respectable. Worthy of respect. Even if we don't know how to perfectly define it, articulate it, there are certain people we can look at and recognize that is a dignified person. And how they carry themselves, but how people respond to them, their reputation, that person is respectable, worthy of respect by how they act, how they live, that sort of thing. This is very similar to what Paul said of elders. They need to be respectable. Secondly, not double-tongued. What does that mean? You have something different there? Double-minded? Gossipers? Okay, does anyone else have sincere? They need to be sincere. They need to not be insincere. A more modern phrase that comes to mind is they don't need to be someone who speaks out of both sides of their mouth, right? They don't need to say one thing to one person and turn right around and say something different to someone else. They don't need to be hypocritical like that, dishonest. That plays out in a whole bunch of different ways, right? You can be deceitful and maliciously deceitful, and where you're just lying to people, that's problematic. I think what Paul's getting at here is the type of person who might say one thing to your face, but then be totally different behind your back. Or who might say one thing to the pastor of the church, because the pastor is authoritative, I better sound good in front of him, but when the pastor's not around, he runs his mouth in all sorts of negative ways. Or maybe it's someone who spreads gossip or whatever. Anyway, they run their mouth in negative ways. Paul says, not that kind of guy. Again, we know that kind of guy. We know how that plays out a lot of different ways, and Paul says it can't be someone who's like that. Thirdly, it says not addicted to much wine. This one's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Not someone who's a drunk or who's beholden to or addicted to alcohol. I would include other substances, but alcohol is the primary one. Do what?
Especially nowadays.
Yeah.
Ezekiel 44:21 says,
So he brought up a passage that's similar from the Old Testament in Ezekiel, talking about how priests should not be drinking wine when they enter certain areas of the temple. Yeah. So the idea is someone who is not beholden to drink, to strong drink. Now, apart from the physical issues that it can happen when someone is an alcoholic, and apart from the very real problematic relational issues that someone can have if they're an alcoholic or addicted to much drink or strong drink, however you want to define it. The deep issue here is someone who's addicted to something like that is someone who cannot and does not exercise self-control or self-discipline. And so they are mastered by something else, and that is problematic, and that person should not be in a position of leadership or authority. So Paul says, not addicted to those things. What's the next one? My translation says, not greedy for dishonest gain. Some of your translations might read that differently. What does y'all say? Not pursuing dishonest gain. Do what? Ooh, yeah, not fond of sordid gain. I like that. Not greedy for money. Do any of y'all have a translation? I think it's one of the older King James or New King James. It says filthy lucre. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that. We don't use that terminology, but it kind of carries the oomph of it, right? And so Paul here is not saying that money or wealth in and of itself is bad or wrong necessarily. He's not saying working hard to provide for your family, to have financial security. He's not saying that in and of itself is bad or wrong necessarily. What he's saying is what? What's the real issue? If you are someone that is so drawn to money that it's turning your heart and your mind away from the ways of the Lord to pursue that, that's a problem. Does this have a hold on you? Is it tugging on you? Is it dictating your thoughts and driving your behavior? Are you so obsessed and so enraptured, consumed by acquiring wealth? He doesn't put a number on it here, right? So it's not about someone having a certain, being in a certain tax bracket or not. It's a character issue. Are you someone that is so enraptured and drawn to wealth that you're willing to cut corners to get there? That you're willing to forsake your integrity to get there? You're willing to be dishonest to get there? That you're willing to exploit others to get there? If so, he says, you are not fit, you are not qualified to be a deacon, right? So money matters, it does. And a wise handling of financial responsibility, absolutely. We're going to have a business meeting in a little bit. We have a really fantastic financial team here. That really matters, having people who know what they're doing with these things. But Paul's saying there gets to a point where if it gets down deep into your heart and it becomes your God, that's going to be problematic. Now, sometimes that's easy to see, and sometimes it's not. So we need the Spirit to help us reveal these things, especially those in positions of leadership. What's the next one? They need to be able to what? Ooh. Hold the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience. Do any of y'all have a different wording in your translation? With a pure conscience. But yeah, hold the mystery of the faith. What is that talking about? The gospel. Essentially, do they know and understand the gospel? Are they holding the mystery of the faith, of what God is doing, his plan to redeem all things? Paul uses this mystery language in other letters, in Ephesians, for example. I think it comes up later in this letter anyway. But he's talking about the gospel, what God has done in Jesus Christ. A deacon needs to be a Christian who knows what he believes and why he believes it, holds the mystery of the faith with a good conscience or a clear conscience or a pure conscience. So here's what I understand that to mean. This does not mean the guy has to be a Bible scholar or a theologian. If they are, awesome. Praise God. Use those gifts for the good of God's people. But what it is saying is they need to know what they believe and why they believe that. Now, why might that be important, especially in this original situation? What were they dealing with in that church? A lot of heresy, a lot of people who sounded smart but said wrong things, or a lot of people that were caught somewhere in the middle and didn't know what they believed, or a lot of people that were kind of unsure. Not just that they were kind of wrestling, faithfully trying to be faithful, but just weren't kind of sure where they land on some of these things. They're undecided about the gospel. Yeah, I'm not opposed to Jesus, but I like what this guy has to say. Paul says that type of person should not be in a position of leadership. They need to know what they believe and why. Are they a person of conviction? They don't have to know everything and be able to perfectly articulate it. He doesn't say they have to be able to teach it. Well, that's a bonus. But do they understand what they believe? Do they know what it means to be a Christian? And then the good conscience part, the pure conscience part, I believe, is touching on then, does their life back it up? That they know and belong to Jesus. That they are trying, not perfectly, but they are trying desperately to be faithful to Jesus. Can they say that they belong to Jesus and not be embarrassed by it? Not be ashamed, not be like looking sideways, hoping y'all don't really know how I live. That's what he's saying. A deacon, we need to look at your life and know that you know who you belong to and know that you know what you believe and why you believe it. That's what he's talking about there. What's the next one? This is verse, was it 10? Yeah. Let them be tested first, and then if they prove themselves blameless, they can serve as deacons. So let's talk about testing. Why do you think Paul throws this in? He had a similar statement about elders, pastors, not being new believers, and he had reasons for it. Why here? What do you think he's talking about? Why the need? Why is it good or important for a potential deacon to be tested before they formally serve as a deacon? He said you can't just take their word for it. Because again, someone might present really well. They might talk real good. That's not good talking, but you know what I'm talking about. They might be really eloquent or impressive or charismatic, but saying it is one thing, living it is another, right? Why else might it be good to test them? Yeah. If someone just shows up, you don't know them, and they're saying the right things, okay, cool, that's a good start, but I need to know more. Show me. Yeah. Yeah, no, make sure he's a team player. Good. Doug, what were you going to say? They hold a lot of responsibility. You don't just hand that over to anybody. Yeah, you want to see, do they have the character to back it up? Yes, Alicia. Yeah. Yeah. She says if it's their true character, you'll see it. And if it's not their true character, it's going to reveal itself. Jesus had a really simple way to explain this. He says, especially dealing with false teachers, he says, you'll know them by their what? Their works, by their fruit. Not just what they say. I hope they're saying good things, but does their life back it up? Steve, what were you going to say? Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask, yeah. Oh, already be serving? We want your character to be on display. It's going to be, one way or another, but we want to see some evidence that you're a person of maturity and of godly character. Trying to think of how many stories I can tell you of how I've learned the hard way in navigating these things. long time ago, early in ministry. I was hiring a youth pastor, and a guy interviewed really well and was excited. He was young, he was excited, he had dreams, and we talked. I'm like, awesome, this guy's great. And I knew in the back of my mind, a heart of hearts, I was rushing things because I was desperate. I needed help. And it's like, he's willing, he's able. We don't pay much, but he's willing to accept what little we pay, and he seems to just be excited for the opportunity. Let's throw this guy in there. Friends, let me tell you, within a month, I knew, I have made a mistake. And it became very clear, very quickly, that this was not the right fit. That yes, he said good things, and I think he believed the good things he said early on, but it became readily apparent and then abundantly apparent that this wasn't right, that there was not the necessary character and maturity from that individual that we needed. And long story short, it was a very, very bumpy road before I just had to step back in and say, this is not working. And I went to school on myself back then. Don't be fooled up front by a good resume or a good interview. Those are great, awesome, good start. But I need you to show me, I need to see some evidence or have people that can vouch for you to know that you have the character that is needed, right? Okay, so that's what he's saying. He's saying vet these guys. And don't rush into it. Let's see it. Because one way or the other, like Alicia was saying, their true character is going to show up, right? One of the things that I learned from doing it the wrong way, the hard way throughout my life, especially with these kind of things, when we go into hiring, right? A couple things I'll tell you just about our process. I don't do it alone. I don't know everything. I don't see everything. And I have a track record of being wrong. So I'm trying to guard myself from myself. And so we have committees. We have search committees. We have a personnel committee. We run that through them. We check references, right? We don't rush ourselves. We don't drag our feet, but we don't rush. We want to get a feel. We interview. We have different stages of interview to try to get a feel outside of the prim and proper, how do I represent myself, right? And so we want to not rush these things, but also a question that I started asking at various stages in the interview, because I want to see how they answer, not just what they say, but how they say. I asked very pointed questions like, tell me about a time when things went wrong for you. What'd you do? So tell me about a time in ministry where someone got mad at you. What happened? How did you respond? Not whose fault was it, whatever, because I want to hear not just what happened. I want to show me your character is what I'm asking. What happens when you're really stressed out? Tell me, what do you do? And that's not to put them on trial, but it's to try to, as best we can, tease out what your character is so that when you get here and those situations rise up, I know that I can trust you to not make a fool of yourself and not make a mess of things. That's what Paul, I went on a little bit of a rant there, but that's what Paul's saying here with deacons. Don't get in a rush. Test them. Essentially give them room to show who they really are, to show that they're mature enough, that they have the character to lead in the ways that you're going to need them to lead and to serve and to bless, right? Also, do you think motivation matters? Absolutely it does. If someone, I've experienced this, not at this church, but someone who was very, very sincere, but I think really wanted to be a deacon, but for all the wrong reasons, and that was a problem. And so we eventually had to talk about that. Being a deacon isn't something you aim for because it's like a special status that you have. What's the role of a deacon? Service. Humility. You're going to do stuff that's not in the limelight, and I need to know that you're in it for the right reasons so that you serve the way that you need to. So that's what Paul is saying here. After they've been tested, he doesn't give a time period there, right? So he's not trying to lay down a rigid, rule for us. But he's saying, hey, just vet them, don't rush it, explore, test their character. Once they've proven themselves, not on trial, but displayed their character, if they're what? My translation says blameless. What does y'all's translation say? Above reproach or beyond reproach? Good. Does anyone else have anything different there? Does anyone have NIV? I think it says, someone has an NIV? What does yours say? Do you have NIV? The end of verse 10. Yeah, that there's nothing against them. So the idea, blameless can sometimes kind of carry more than it needs to. The idea is not that they're like completely flawless and never make mistakes, but there's no major red flag that we can point to. Again, a sign of character is when you do make mistakes, do you know what to do about it? Do you know how to apologize? Do you know how to make amends? Do you know how to humble yourself? Right? That's what we're saying. Steve? Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah. He says, hire from within, he's saying, because you know them. And you can see it before they've even been asked to fill this role. So let me ask you this question. If we, for example, theoretically here at our church, have someone new join our church, and they seem wonderful, and they have a great family, and they're excited to be here, and they're very gung-ho, and we find out that they served as a deacon at their former church, should they be a deacon here? Yes or no? Maybe. Okay. Maybe what? What does it depend on? Well, let's find out. Like, praise God. If you serve somewhere else, awesome. I am so glad. If you're interested in serving here, I'm also very glad. But I want to get to know you a little bit. I want to get a feel for your character. Do what? Oh, yeah, it could be that you're no longer a deacon there. That's why you want to be a deacon here. Yeah, you never know, right? And so we never, shoot someone down, but we just tell them, awesome, we'll keep coming, and we'll see, And we actually have a clause in our bylaws about they have to be here in good standing. Is it a whole year? I think it's a year. Yeah, because we want to know. And guess what happens? People who are not of good character, they self-remove, right? And people who are of godly character, who aren't hunting for anything other than to serve God, they're more than fine waiting a year, right? And so it does, absolutely. Makes it easier. Okay, this next section, verse 11, I will tell you shortly because I'm running out of time, is another debatable verse, and it is sometimes, I think, unnecessarily controversial. Some translations say their wives, referring to the wife of a deacon. Some translations say just women, meaning like women deacons potentially. The Greek just literally has the word women. I'm not going to get into like the full fight over it. I don't think, as you've heard me say earlier, I don't think Paul is opposed to women and women serving in the life of the church. He actually in Romans 16 refers to Phoebe, I believe, as a deacon. He uses some of the same language. But here in this case, based on the context of what is going on in the life of this church, and based on the context of what Paul is talking about in this particular passage, I think he's talking about the wife of a deacon, or the wives of those who are serving as deacons. So those who are married to a deacon, or a deacon, if you're going to be a deacon, there are qualifications for your wife as well. Why do you think that matters? Why would Paul even bring this up? Maybe. Why do you think Paul would mention the wife of a deacon? Because two are one? Because they go together? Yeah, absolutely. What else? Think about the context of this church, what was happening. It was dysfunctional. And there were a lot of women in this particular church who were causing all sorts of problems and who were acting out in different ways or speaking out in different ways that were causing dysfunction and distraction and disunity. And so Paul is saying it's not about just you individually, it's you and your family, right? As he's talking to the elder position, and he's going to talk about this with the deacons as well and their children, like you and who you belong to and who belong to you, are they up to the task as well? What were you going to say? No, not mine. I do everything. Everything great about me is all me. No, absolutely. Yeah, he said, I don't know about you, but my wife influences my decisions. Yes, I am who I am. All the good stuff for me is from people in my life, so my wife especially. Yeah, she's going to be an influence. One way or the other, good or bad, right? And so Paul says, like, that matters. But also, I hear in this, yes, the man, the husband, is the one formally serving, but the wife, like, this is for you too. We need you. He needs you, and we need you. And so he's not dragging you along. You're not dragging him along. Like, you're involved in this too. And so your character matters. And so he has lists for her. What does he say? I'm going to go through them quick because I'm out of time. But bottom line, she needs to be mature and self-controlled, right? They need to be worthy of respect, dignified. They need to not run their mouths, so not gossiping or spreading falsehood. They need to be sober-minded, clear thinking, able to use wise judgment, not easily falling into false teaching or false influences. He'll come back to that later in the letter. Lastly, in my translation, it says she needs to be faithful in all things. What do you think that means? Okay, faithful to the Lord in all things. What's included in all things? All things. Again, is she trustworthy? Is she dependable? Is she mature? Again, not perfect, but is she faithful? Is she seeking to be faithful in every area of her life? Not just her church life with her church friends, but at the marketplace, when she's traveling, when she's home, when she's with the husband, when she's with the kids. I mean, different areas of her life, all things, is she seeking to be faithful? What were you going to say? Oh, yeah. All right, she needs to be faithful to the faith, and know how to use sober judgment and not fall into false teaching or other weird pagan practices, for example. Next, he shifts back to the husband. He's still talking about the family unit, though. He says he needs to be a husband of one wife. The literal translation from the Greek is a one-woman man. We talked about this last time with pastors. I don't think this refers to divorce, even though I think that matters and is worth looking into and discussing. I think, is he faithful to his wife? Is he true and faithful to the woman he's married to? And as we mentioned last time, that's not just about the physical. Again, in that culture, in that day and age, it was super easy and super common to go to a temple, sleep with a prostitute. That wasn't even scandalous, right? It was just super common. It's what everybody does. Don't do that. That's not for you. You need to be faithful to your wife physically with your body. Absolutely. But is that all it includes? No. Are you faithful to your wife here? Are you faithful to your wife here emotionally? Are you good to her? Right? That's what he's saying. And then similarly, related to that, last term, they need to be able to manage their household well. How I understand that, again, just like with the pastor, this is less about the kids being perfect and more about the father, more about the man. Is he a good father? Is he a good leader in the home? Does he know and teach what is good and right and true? Does he model what is good and right and true? I've known a lot of men who are really heavy-handed about knowing the truth, but then you look at their life and they made their families miserable. I say, there's a disconnect there. That's not managing your household well. Do what? Yeah, bullies. I've known a lot of bullies who say a lot of really true things, but live really horrible lives, right? So he's saying, don't do that. Be a good dad. Managing your household well isn't controlling your household. It's leading your household. I got time for a mini rant. Paul in Ephesians, right? When he's talking about kind of household codes, how different members of the house should relate to each other. He's talking about husband and wives. I'm thinking Ephesians 5, right? And he talks about husbands loving their wives as what? As Christ loved the church. What did Christ do for the church? Sacrificed. Loving, humble, sacrificial love. Dads, do you have that kind of love and that kind of leadership in the home? That's the bar, right? Are you looking to Christ? Are you following his example in the home? Not controlling them, not bossing them around, not crushing them, dominating them, because that only works for a little period of time anyway, right? Because then they grow up and they get out and they don't want anything to do with you or the church. But if you are leading in the home, if you mess up and you own up to it and you humble yourself and you ask forgiveness, right? If they see your character and if they want you around, I know when they get teenage years, they may not want you around in a different way. That's a different issue, right? But do they run from you or do they run to you? When problems come up, do they run from you or do they run to you? That's what he's calling dads to. What difference does that make, that kind of dad? What kind of difference does that make in a home? A huge difference, right? What kind of difference does a church with those kind of men make? A huge difference in the church. And then those who aren't in the church, they see that kind of guy, and they see the other kind of guys that are out there. Where do they want to be? I may not know everything about that God, but there's something different about those men than the men that I've known, or the men that I've been around, or the man that I am, right? That draws people, that blesses the family, it blesses the church, it honors God, and it bears witness. Okay, one last thing. Verse 13. What happens if they do this well? He says there's a double blessing. On the one hand, the deacons themselves, he says, how does he say it in my translation? For those who serve well as deacons gain a good standing for themselves. And that's not about ego, but that is about, hey, you've developed a good reputation. Now, why might that matter? Witness. Again, in a church that was a wreck, a church that was a mess, a church that had bad leaders and a bad reputation, you put in men who are good leaders with good reputation, who are worthy of respect. People notice. It impacts others, but it also bears witness. So you've earned a good reputation. You should be proud of that and the witness that shares. And then lastly, I love this. What does he say? They also get what? Great assurance in their faith in Christ Jesus. You draw closer to Jesus. It's not just about doing all these tasks and cleaning up a messy church. That's going to be involved in there somewhere, but you get to come in closer. Your strength, your faith is strengthened. You get to know Jesus more and more and more than maybe you would outside of that. So this is a good thing. This is a holy thing. This is a high calling. It's important. It's important to lead in this humble position in a way that is godly character. All right, let me close with this. Got like 1 minute. I'm going to ask one question, and the next week we'll come back because there's more questions here that I think are worth spending some time in. Why does this matter? Why is Paul taking time to tell Timothy, to tell the Ephesians qualifications for a deacon? And why should we care today? Why does any of this matter? I mean, he already talked about pastors, the guy at the top. Why do deacons matter? Why should anyone care? Go back to Acts? They've got good work to do. Yeah, they are responsible to maintain the well-being of the body. Again, if you have good leaders in place, blessing, flourishing. Now, again, not perfection, but sometimes even their missteps, if they have good character, God can use that and redeem that and make it flourish, right? But if you get people of bad character in positions of authority or leadership or prominence, they can do a whole lot of damage to the people. So absolutely it matters that you get the right people in the right place. George, what were you going to say? Different rows. To lead is to serve. Yeah, absolutely. If you get leaders, again, who say a lot of the right things, but then just can't be bothered to actually do something to help somebody, what happens? Who picks up the slack? Maybe somebody else, hopefully, but that's not going to go on for long, right? You're going to burn people out, or you're going to hurt people, or all sorts of problems. And so this absolutely matters for the health and the flourishing of God's people. Okay. What other questions or comments do you have? Yes, sir. Wow, that's a great question. So that's a very practical question. He says, is there a set number of deacons that a church has to have or needs to have or should have? And that just varies. It varies on the size of the church, I think, the needs of the church, the people in the church. So, yeah, what did you say? Location. Yeah, there are a lot of different factors. Paul doesn't give us that, does he? So he focuses on what type of person, and then I think that leaves us room as Christians under the leadership and influence of the Spirit to look at our situation and then see what we need to do. Some resources, if you look into it today, there is some like kind of formula generally about for every certain amount of number of members, you need to have at least one deacon, but it really depends on the church and even the denomination. And so, but ideally, it's not just one person making that decision, that the people of the church, the leadership of the church, can kind of determine where you are. So at our church, for example, I can bring that up if I see it and need it. I can mention it in a deacon's meeting. Our deacons themselves are allowed that sounds funny, are encouraged to bring it up and to discuss and keep an eye on that. And so if our church continues to grow, which it has in the last couple of years, we recognized, our deacon body recognized, hey, we need more deacons so we can keep everything covered. And so we've adjusted. Or if we lose deacons for moving or passing away or whatever, then we want to make sure we fill those spots. Not rushing, but going through the process so that everyone is covered. Yeah, good question. Okay, Scott. bring that up next week. That's good. This is good stuff. So he was talking about not being greedy and not being obsessed or overwhelmed by the need for money. So we'll talk about it. Okay. Let's transition to our prayer list. And then we will move into business meeting after that.